There was a moment in the extended edition of this podcast episode where this line popped up that would make literally the perfect title for this episode. And it's, "Am I the problem?" I don't think my producer is going to let that be the title for SEO purposes. But that being said, if you've ever felt in your community building journey, hold on, am I the problem? Is this just not working? Do I need to shut this thing down? Or do I need to lean in and pivot and work a little bit harder? If you've never experienced that, then you're probably not doing this right, building community, because it is intense work and a roller coaster of a journey. And in this episode, I was so grateful to be joined by Salome, who has been through over a decade of owning her craft and her expertise and 5 years of running her community membership. And she really did the deep work to understand where the community aligned with her business and when it no longer did. And I'm so grateful to have her share her reflections here on this podcast, because not only do we have so much to learn about how to artfully and tastefully sunset our memberships when the time is right, but there's so much to learn for new community builders, building new communities, about what to anticipate, what to think about, the questions you need to ask now in order to build a community for longevity. Enjoy. Welcome to Dear Bri, an advice column for community conundrums, fiascos, and drama. This season of Dear Bri is sponsored by our friends over at Heartbeat. Heartbeat is an all-in-one community platform, and it's the one I chose to host my own community. Your members can finally have events, conversation, content, and even courses in one distraction-free, intimate, customized home. I chose Heartbeat for 3 reasons. First, Heartbeat is unparalleled in their events management features. Events are a core part of my community architecture, and their features make my life so much easier. Second is segmentation. It's super easy to break my community into smaller, more niche subgroups and create a more customized experience for that group in Heartbeat. And finally, their courses. Being able to host my educational materials and learning journey in a community-first platform makes my community that much more valuable and retention that much stickier. I'm an affiliate with Heartbeat, which means when you sign up through my link in the show notes, I get paid a small amount at no extra charge to you. Thank you for supporting my work in that way. And finally, I usually record this podcast from Hawaii Island, so a special thank you to the Kanaka Maoli people on whose land I currently reside. Our guest today is an advertising and online marketing expert, passionate about helping coaches and course creators turn their knowledge and expertise into predictable, profitable, wealth-generating freedom empires. You can catch her on the Launch Lounge podcast, where she breaks down the advertising and online marketing strategies that will help you build hot audiences, become the go-to expert in your niche, and turn your knowledge into that freedom empire. Salome Shalak, welcome to this podcast. I'm so grateful to have you. And for our listeners to get a little bit of context, we locked eyes in a room full of tipsy women at Alt Summit. And I like both intuited. I was on my end. I don't know what you were thinking, but I was like, oh, this is a quiet authority. And I love, in the chaotic environments of those conferences, I love like seeking out people who are just experts in their own right. And how long have you been running your business for now?
I started on the 1st of July, 2014. I started the first rendition of this, but officially became an ads manager by about 2017, or started making money from running ads for people in 2017.
So when you just can tell that someone knows their shit, that was like the immediate.
It's like dog years and internet years.
I'm like, girl knows what's up. Get her on a podcast. Well, you already have your own podcast, but I'm like, get her on this podcast.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. And I have to confess, I was one of those tipsy women, because in a networking environment, mama's going to have a little champagne.
As is your right.
It is not my most comfortable space, but I guess it's like you're saying, we locked eyes and I think we were 3 sentences in when we were like, okay, yeah, tell me more. And that's always nice.
Yeah. And then Salome was like, okay, give me your business card. And I was like, I don't have one. She's okay, what's your Instagram? I'm like, I don't have one. I'm the worst networker.
Which is fantastic because it tells me that you are where you want to be and you are owning your own space and not following the crowds and doing what you think the masses want you to do. I love that you have clear boundaries and you know how to build your business and you build it the way that works for you. I'm all about that.
Thank you. I will just receive that. That was really sweet. Salome, are you ready for the letter I've prepared for you?
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Dear Bri, I'm in the thick of something and I don't know if I'm supposed to push through or let go. I started a membership community that I really believed in. I still do, at least in theory. The mission is solid. The people who do show up are kind and thoughtful. I know there's a real need for what I'm offering, but the growth is slow. Engagement is inconsistent. And I find myself constantly having to convince people to care. Some months, it feels like I'm dragging this thing uphill with one arm tied behind my back. Other times, there are glimmers of magic that make me think, okay, maybe this just needs more time. I've tried switching up the offer, tweaked the pricing, refreshing the content, everything the quote experts say to do. But I'm still not sure if I'm building something that just needs more nurturing or if I'm clinging to something that has run its course. So here's my question. How do I know when to double down and keep pushing? And how do you know when it's time to let go? Sincerely, Wavering But Hopeful. Where do you feel that one in your body? Just asking for a friend.
Where do I not feel that one in my body? Oh, wavering. I wish I can give you a hug. This is tough. Okay, so there's so many layers to this, right? There's so many layers to this. I think let me answer this first as a human, a creative human, entrepreneur, person who runs a business based on things we love, based on our own personalities, our own knowledge, our own information, our own identities, really, that does get poured into these businesses. They do get poured into these businesses. And then I will answer your question as a marketer guru because the two people are going to give you different answers.
Yeah, that's okay. Good.
I just recently went through this and I spoke about it on my podcast recently, but I made the very tough, and I promise you it was a really tough decision to close down my membership, which I had been running for nearly 5 years. And so when Wavering talks about the glimmers of hope and the glimmers of joy, like I know from my experience in my membership, it was more than glimmers. There were abundant joy, abundant, I love this so freaking much. I just want to drink it. There were months and years that was like that. And a few things happened in my business. There were some things like the post-iOS effects when nobody was interested in ads. They weren't touching ads. That had an impact on my business. The other thing that had an impact on my business was when COVID started going away, people started going back to their jobs. That had an impact on my business. So by the beginning of 2023, I was starting to make some of my team members redundant. We weren't growing anymore as a business. And I was working really hard to try to keep things alive and to try to keep things going. And whilst I ended up with a core group of clients that we were still working with and doing amazing work with, I was trying to launch the membership and it wasn't quite landing the way that it used to land. And in that same space, I brought someone in to recreate the membership space for me. And because I was distracted with everything else that went on, I didn't rebuild it in a way that I felt made it possible for our students to really feel that they're being taken care of in terms of finding the content that was there and in terms of really knowing how to navigate this community and how to make the most of it. And that's totally on me. So in 2023, that happened. And then in 2024, got to the same place where Wavering is right now. I got to that space where I felt, I love this. I don't ever want to disappoint my students, but I'm a bit embarrassed that I keep hearing from them that they can't find the content that they used to be able to find. I would bring new students in and I would very quickly notice that they're feeling overwhelmed, or I would notice that they're not quite using the material that was in there the way they used to. And so as a result of that, the engagement dropped. And as a result of that, the quality, I feel like the quality of what I was getting when we were together in coaching calls, I kept getting the same sort of questions over and over. And I would refer people to the training. And then I felt like the training wasn't landing as well as I wanted it to land, or as well as it used to land. Because if I go back to the heyday of this became clear to me when I did the postmortem, is that the problem didn't arise later on. The problem was a foundational problem. And I'll come back to that in a second. But what I want to say is, Wavering, I feel you, I hear you, because I've been where you're at, and I did have to make the hard decision to close it down. Here's what I want to say to you, human to human. I want you to create something that you feel brings you life, that you feel brings you the best joy and the most joy in terms of the way that you're delivering it. I built my membership based on how I saw other people build it. I had a course and we went through the course and we all had an amazing time for 8 weeks. And then when the 8 weeks of that course delivery came to an end, everyone was saying, how can we do more of this? How do we do more of this? And so I literally sent out an email to my list and saying, I'm starting a membership. It doesn't have a name. It's called The Membership right now. And we've been having so much fun with me answering people's questions that I'm going to just keep doing it. And that was the birth of the membership. And then I started adding content to it to give people a little bit of an opportunity to learn the theory that I was teaching them in all the questions. So from that perspective, I think it was foundationally flawed from the beginning, right? That was my experience. But as it grew and as it grew and as it changed and as I grew and as I changed and the things that I went through, by the end of it, what I set out to create and what I had wasn't the same thing anymore. And I was holding on to it mainly because I didn't want to disappoint the students that was there. But someone asked me a hard question a while back, and it's a question that's living in my heart a lot these last few months. It is, if you had to build your business today so that 5 years from now, you're still leaping out of bed, excited, and it fills you with joy and with energy, what are you doing today? And that question hit me, and I started realizing that I am doing myself a disservice and I'm doing my students a disservice by holding on to something that is not currently in its current form built to serve me the best that it can, or built to serve them the best that it can. Is it okay? Yeah, it's okay. Does it have its ups and downs? Yeah. But is it a real source of life, a real source of joy, a real source of growth for my students? I had to be honest and say, not at the level at which I know that it can be. And I realized that by not stopping the membership, I was not doing myself a favor. I was not doing them any favors. I was continuing to deliver mediocre results. And the cost of that on my energy and my joy became too much. And that's my sort of human answer, is just, what are you holding on to? And what is it costing you to hold on to this? And how is it standing in your way from really creating something that is life-giving to you and to your students?
I love this. And if you don't love going into your community every day, your members won't either. It sounds selfish, but build the community that you know you're going to be obsessed with 5 years from now. So you like can't wait to come into, that you can't wait to share knowledge and connection. If you are not jazzed about it, no one is going to be more excited for your community than you are. I want to go back to something that you said about the foundation being flawed, because I think a lot of people trip into memberships from that. Well, we need something follow-up and recurring revenue sounds nice.
Yeah.
Sure, let's do membership. So what about that structure felt flawed to you? Or do you think in retrospect didn't like align with what you wanted the community to be?
I think it aligned so well. It was so beautiful. It was so lovely in the beginning because I had this experience going through. So I launched the course that was the pre-thing to this membership. I launched it on the 20th of March, 2020. So yeah, pick a date for, maybe I should have read my horoscope that day. But so I launched the course on the 20th of March, 2020, and my students and I went through a period in history that I don't think not many people have been through. Well, maybe everyone on the planet right now who was alive then did go through it, but it was a very stressful and emotional and weird time. And we had this collective shared experience. And so by the end of the 8 weeks, we were all still in lockdown. We were all still very much in the thick of what was going on with COVID. That when they said, well, how can we continue this? How can we do more of this? I wanted more and they wanted more. And when I emailed my email list, they wanted more. They wanted to be a part of it. And so the membership was born and it became the Launch Lounge membership. That initial first, I want to say the first year, a lot of my students said it's their favorite community on the internet. And it was so wonderful. And then I did add the educational content to it, which I felt made it even better. And we brought in new members and new members kept coming and we had new members and new members. But I think after 4.5 years, there were about 4 original members left. And there were more people who came in fresh who didn't have that initial shared experience. And by the time they came in, the content was a little bit chaotic. I'll just say it was a bit like in the way that we had restructured it in 2023, it wasn't easy to navigate the way that it used to be. And I knew that I have to block out a month in my calendar, recreate that content, restructure the educational piece of the membership, recreate the onboarding experience. Like I had to recreate it, but I already knew I had to recreate it at the beginning of 2024. And I spent the entire 2024 not recreating it. And so I had to at some point go, what is the procrastination about? When I started asking myself the hard questions, I realized the procrastination is about that I have outgrown this. And I started it in a specific context and environment when it did make sense, when it was the best thing to do, when it was, and I did just go, oh, what are they teaching me about back-end memberships? And I'll just do that and I'll get recurring revenue. And it worked well for a long time. And it can still work if I want to pour that energy into it. But if I sit down and I look at it, you've helped me realize this as well, as I have realized that in trying to build it the way that I've seen some of my mentors build theirs and the way that I've seen our industry build memberships, I realized that for me, community is a very specific thing. And it is not what a lot of people want from community. I am an introvert at heart. I do not like getting tons of notifications. I don't like being digitally available to people. What I do love is education. What I do love is going through a shared learning environment, going through a shared learning experience with people that has a clear beginning and an end. That I love. When we're doing that, I want to hang out with those people all day. They give me energy, they give me joy, they fill me with so much delight. And I lost some of that delight because of the ongoing nature of the membership model. And when I sat down and I was like, okay, what do I really want? How do I thrive when I'm teaching? How do I thrive when I'm building community? And I realized it does not look like an evergreen open membership where people can learn or not learn, come to calls or not come to calls, and I'm expected to keep some kind of community engagement going. I'm very clear that what comes next is not that. But I also know the magic that I can create in terms of community and in terms of a community experience and creating culture and creating fun experiences for people when we're all there, because our main goal is to learn together and when we have a clear start and stop. And so I'm very clear now. That lights me up. And that's where this started, right? And so the next phase of whatever the membership will be a lot more focused around a clear start and stop, a clear curriculum, clear outcomes, clear learning outcomes, and ways to measure progress for my students.
This podcast is sponsored by Ember Consulting, where I'm the founder and head community creator. At Ember, we help people who are familiar with running their business on content, coaching, or consulting become community powered. As you hear in this podcast, creating a community is really tough and managing it can be even harder. So don't do it alone. Whether you're looking to launch a new community or pivot your strategy, our one-on-one consulting helps you skip the learning curve and do it right the first time. And when you're ready to belong to a space just for community creators learning, testing, and growing their communities together, check out the Ember community. Now, back to the episode. This is so good. I have a couple trailheads in my mind, and what I'm doing as you're talking is I'm transposing the words that you're saying over my matrix of communities. And I just will include that in the show notes for this episode because I think it's so foundational. And what we're seeing, I'm going to offer up an interpretation of what happened. And I'd love for you to reflect back how it lands. You started in your sweet spot, an education-centric communal experience. I call these transformative communities.
Yeah.
You fell into what ended up being a second community, your membership, a connection-centric space where people are like, okay, the educational journey is over, but we want to stay connected. There's so much value being exchanged between people. And you hit that at the exact moment where COVID shortcutted connection for you, where that was not your sweet spot, but you hit it at a time and place where everyone was like so desperate for, and they've come out of what you created, which was a very rich, very community-centered, like educational experience. And that just carried you and carried your membership. But once that environment went away and once in those circumstances and once those members started to trickle off, you were left with this connection-centric space. And now you're like, well, okay, I can see the things practically I have to do. Like this can work. It's not a question of can it or can't it. It can work. And you're seeing like the list of things like, okay, I got to change this. I've got to change that. I've got to change that. But like inside, you're like, I'm an educator. I don't want to be doing this stuff.
Yeah.
And so maybe consciously or unconsciously, you self-sabotage or you procrastinate or you find all like the really good excuses and reasons why not to. And then until you arrived at like the brave place of making that decision and saying, what this is today is not what I want it to look like. Is that a fair reflection?
Totally, 100%. And I think where I ended up was, and I think so many of your listeners might feel this way too. I feel like I ended up pleasing people by keeping it open. Yeah. And I just don't think none of us dreams of one day being a great people pleaser.
One of these days, I will just people please.
Being a people pleaser. No.
From dawn until dusk, I'll just be pleasing people.
No, the emotional cost, the time cost, and then eventually people pick up on that energy and they bring the same energy and it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you attuned to that. Because that was going to be my follow-up question. Like shutting down the community is just such like a distinct ending. And you could make the argument that you could, with the same realizations of, okay, this is not my zone of genius, but this is, the argument could be made that you could have just pivoted within your existing membership. So talk to me more about getting to that place where you were like, nope, I have to close the doors.
Well, okay. I think that's a really great question. And I think that's where I'm shifting towards speaking to our dear writer, Wavering, more as a marketer. And I said, I'm going to answer her question, her or his question as a human, but now I'm going to answer it as a marketer. The goal of a business is to make profit, right? We cannot get around that. And it gets messy for us course creators, coaches, community leaders, consultants, anybody who is selling their own thoughts, anybody who's selling their own personality, their own way of delivering things, their own way of doing things. We operate in this very weird and mushy space between being experts who are creative and actually at the heart of it, probably a little bit artistic, and running profit-generating businesses, which can sometimes bump up against each other a little bit. So as the marketer, I had to firstly say, well, do I have another revenue stream that is healthy enough that if I close down this revenue stream, it's not going to have a catastrophic impact on my business? And I do. I have 2 other revenue streams in my business that can run very well without the membership being there. So that was the first thing. The second thing is I had to literally make a list of, okay, if I shut this down, what support that I'm paying for will I not be paying for anymore? So in other words, what costs are there that I'm cutting by not having to support this? How much of my time will I get back if I cut this? And then literally, how much revenue am I going to lose? And how am I going to deal with that? And so for the members that were on month-to-month payments, I had to consider, I'm going to lose that amount of revenue every month. Can I afford it? Will my business remain profitable and remain running if I lose this recurring revenue? And the answer to that was yes. And that brought me then to the annual members. And that was a little bit more tricky. And I had to come up with a solution that I could present to them and be in my own integrity and honor the fact that they've paid for 12 months of a service that I'm now cutting short. And I came up with the idea that for some of them, I will offer, or at least I'll create a choice for them. And the choice would be either I will offer them a different kind of support for a short period, so a little bit more one-on-one attention, but for a short period. And I had to put a boundary around that. Or I had to say, well, some of them are going to want refunds. I'm going to have to be okay with that. And that hurt and it was painful, but I worked out if everybody wants refunds, how much is that going to cost me and can I afford it? And luckily, only one person wanted a refund. And so I worked it out. What's the partial refund based on their annual payment? And I was able to easily afford giving that one person a partial refund. And for the other people, I'm still paying for it. I'm paying in my time. But I know working one-on-one with these students brings me much more joy. And so for a short period of time, I will be working with them one-on-one because I gave them that as the option. That's part of where I'm going anyway. That's part of what I feel. It answers the question, what brings me joy? Where's the life? And so that's just a lead into whatever is going to be the next iteration of the membership. So I was comfortable with that. So those were I had to really ask myself those questions. And I guess if I was in a position where the answer to that was, I can really not afford to lose this revenue stream, then that's where I start talking to Waving as a marketer. And that's where she's already I keep calling her she, but it might be she or he. They're already in the right place with you, listening to you, to learn how to create a great community. So I will say, learn from Bri, make sure you implement what Bri teaches and turn this community around. And if you have this situation, it's possible that either you're pitching this membership to the wrong people, Like you're not quite clear on who your ideal customer is, or you're having a hard time articulating what the solution is that this membership actually, or this community actually will give your members. And so that's marketing problems, right? It's understanding the real benefits and the real tangible outcomes that your ideal customer dreams of when they close their eyes at night, that second before they drift off to sleep. What is it that they're saying to themselves? If I can just, like if you can nail that little piece, if I can just, and you put that in your marketing and you speak to that and you deliver on that promise that gives them that thing that they dream of in your membership, you'll already feel like you're attracting a better quality sale. You're attracting a more engaged student or community member. You're attracting people who are more aligned with your values. Don't be afraid to be controversial in your marketing. Let those people who are not your people, let them leave. You don't want them to come into your community just so that you can make a bit of money. It's not worth it. It's absolutely not worth it.
It's not worth the energy exchange.
Nope.
That's really good. What about, I want to go back to the people pleasing bit, because I think that's a tough one to work around. Were you ever afraid that you were giving up on your members? Like, how did you get around that and all the stories that come with that labor?
I think I held on for so long because I was so afraid of giving up on them. I was so afraid of feeling like I'm disappointing them. I was afraid in my head, the first thing was, but they're paying to be here. They are paying me to do this. Who am I to say, I no longer want to take your money and I'm no longer going to show up for you? That was really hard for me. And I kept having this argument in my head about it until I got to a point where I just realized that it's that thing of the cost of not saying no to things. You don't realize the cost of not saying no to things, especially good things, until someone almost hits you over the head with it. And that question, like, what does it look like in 5 years if it's lighting me up, made me really think about what can I create? What have I created in the past? What lights me up? And then coming to the realization that we are all always growing and we are all always implementing systems that we see other people have designed or created. And when we have no other reference point, we just adopt that system. And that's good advice. That's a good thing to do. That is how you start building a business, is you copy the system that already works that someone else has. But when you're 5 years down the track and you're constantly arguing with yourself about why you should or shouldn't shut it down, I think that is the red flag. The red flag is the fact that you're asking the question. The fact that you're asking the question says something about it is not in alignment with either with who you want to work with or how you want to work with them. And it could be as simple as, oh yeah, it's because I've taken on this model that was modeled to me. But actually, when I sit down and I make a list of what lights me up, it doesn't match with this model. And so maybe that's why my students aren't getting the most out of this. I'm not getting the most out of this. But I keep serving them because I think, well, I just have to keep showing up and giving them this tiny little piece of me because that's what they want and that's what they keep coming back for. But ultimately, in 5 years from now, do I just want to say, yeah, great, I continue to give students a tiny little piece of me because that's what they wanted? Or am I here to create something awesome? Something that is going to create massive impact, something that's going to create massive change? Yeah, sign me up for that. And so I feel like there's a time where you sit down and you ask yourself, well, what about this don't I want? What about this doesn't work? And maybe there's another differentiation is, what about this community doesn't work for a business community right now? for the way that it was designed? And what about it doesn't work for me? And that can be two different answers. That can be because it can be, you can need to learn some skills and implement some things to make it better as a business community, which is great. And then you do that if you love it. Or if there's something fundamentally in there in the way that it's designed that doesn't light you up, maybe because you built it based on someone else's model, then you need to go, well, yeah, we need to change this here. And I love that you've shared how you ended up completely redoing your setup, because clearly your setup was still lighting you up and is built on that thing that lights you up and that brings you joy and that you feel you are creating life. And so you were able to say, okay, how do we restructure it so that it works even more? But that's different from what I was experiencing, where I was like, yeah, no, I need to prune this. Does that answer your question? I can't even remember your question.
It was a beautiful journey down the rabbit trail. And I will even maybe add this little mental trick for some of our people pleasers who might be listening. And what I heard from your response is that running your community from the place of trying to please other people serves no one.
Yes.
And if ultimately what we are about, what your community is about, is creating growth and transformation and serving you and serving your members, you have to, like, your duty is to lead it from a place that gives you life, that makes you want to show up and makes you stoked to provide that value.
Yes.
And if it is anything less than that, it is not worthy of your time or your members' time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. I agree. So good.
It's so fun that we get to do work that by default keeps us in our zone of genius. If you're not doing the thing that you love, you're going to suck at it. Like if you're not showing up stoked on it and it's bringing you joy, it's going to crumble. I kind of love that it like forces us to stay in this zone of genius where we have to do the work every single day to ask and reflect and understand, am I doing work that really brings me life?
Yeah. And how lucky are we? Because otherwise we should just all go and get jobs. But how lucky are we that we get to create? Is there anything better than creating something out of nothing? I don't know. I feel like creating something out of nothing that helps transform other people in any way, isn't that just the ultimate?
It's beautiful. Yeah.
It's the best.
Truly, it's such a privilege.
Yeah.
Salome, thank you so much for those insights. Is there anything else, any other final advice you have for Wavering before we head into our lightning round of questions?
I want to tell Wavering that she or he is not alone. There are many of us entrepreneurs going through the same thing. So please don't feel alone. Please don't feel despondent. Do reach out like you did to someone like Bri or a mentor or someone and share this stuff, because we need to hear this stuff more often. We need to talk about this. This is not the glamorous side. This is not the side of businesses that make it onto Instagram. And we need to share honestly and openly about these things more often.
And a little bit of an anonymous letter helps with that, right? It helps us all get the advice we need.
Love it. Love it. That's why I love the format of your podcast.
Are you ready for our lightning round of questions for our secret podcast?
I am. Yes, give it to me.
What's a moment in your community journey that made you stop and think, wait, am I the problem? Tell us about a time when a member surprised you in a good way or a bad way, and what did it teach you? Now that your community is sunsetting, what will you focus your energy on instead? It doesn't have to be a new community, but if it was, we'd be excited.
Want to know the answers to this lightning round? Sign up for Dear Bri, the extended edition. It's a secret video podcast you only get when you're signed up for the Ember newsletter. You'll hear their answers and put a face to the voice you've just become friends with over the last hour. Click on the link inside the show notes to join.
Salome, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people follow and support your work?
They can find me wherever they are listening to this podcast. They can just look for The Launch Lounge and listen to my podcast as well. And then my website is thelaunchlounge.com if you want to check that out. But I'd love to have you guys come and listen to my podcast as well.
10 out of 10 recommend. I've reviewed it. I've listened. So good. So good.
Thank you. Thank you so
much. Yeah. Thanks, Salome.
Thank you so much for sharing some space with me on this episode. Please like and review wherever you find your podcasts. To submit your own community conundrum, fiasco, or other drama, go to the link in the show notes. Aloha and catch you next time.